Hi, I'm Rabbi Phil Cohen. In June of 2025, I traveled to Israel hoping to meet with rabbis and talk with them about their lives in the rabbinate, mainly in Israel. It goes without saying that I've been deeply interested in Israel for as long as I can remember. Its people, its arguments, its constantly shifting present. But this time, I wanted to listen in a somewhat different way. I wanted to hear the stories of Israeli rabbis, why they chose this calling, what sustains them, what they have learned, and what they hope for specifically in the Israeli context. And I was very lucky. I met with men and women from different denominations, different stages of life, different corners of the country. My plan was to visit them in their homes, to sit across from them and talk face to face. Unfortunately, the week I arrived, Israel entered a 12-day clash with Iran. I ended up conducting all of my interviews from my Airbnb on Zoom. Incoming missiles interrupted one interview as my subject and I both fled to shelter. Even on Zoom, however, the conversations, all of them, were rich, revealing, and deeply human. Something unexpected came out of that experience. Originally, I had planned to speak with rabbis all around the world for this podcast. Maybe I still will going forward. But for now, I'm staying with Israeli rabbis. Their stories and Israel's stories are bound up together in very interesting and creative ways, and I find that connection endlessly fascinating. That, then, is what this podcast is about. The lives, the questions, the faith of those who serve the Jewish people, and the God with whom we live in covenant across our shared history. I am Rabbi Phil Cohen, and I am a small part of that story. When I was in Israel last year with my podcast in mind, I'd intended to visit all of my interview subjects at their homes or offices. But the 14-day war interfered. Rabbi Leora Ezrahi Vered was the only rabbi I had the opportunity to visit in person. I took a train from Tel Aviv to outside of Haifa. Being a neophyte on the trains to Haifa, I didn't know that there were 2 train lines that traveled there. I took the wrong one and ended up a good taxi ride away from her home. But our conversation in her living room was warm and fascinating. Unfortunately, I had another bit of bad luck. The memory stick that held the interview was corrupt, and I lost the interview. So Leora was gracious enough to allow another interview, this time through the communication tool of Zoom, from the U.S. I came away from our conversation deeply impressed by the work she does with an interfaith organization called the Spirit of the Galilee. But more, I saw in her a woman who embraces a liberal Jewish spirit and manifests it in her current work, as well as in the pulpit she occupied for several years. Leora Ezrahi Vered, who lives north of Haifa, and you can correct me if I got the geography wrong. And she has very interesting background, very interesting work that she's doing. Maybe we'll start with the fact that you come from a rabbinic family, and your mom had an important role in Reform Judaism in Jerusalem. I don't want to talk too much about your mom, but a bit about your family background and perhaps how that factored into your decision to become a rabbi.
I was born in 1982 in Jerusalem to a mixed family, an Israeli-born father and American-born mother, which is why I speak with this fancy accent, as I like to call it. But I, except for a very short period as a child, I've never lived in the United States. And culturally and behaviorally, I feel very much Israeli. And I do come from a rabbinic family on my mother's side. My mother is a rabbi. My uncle is a rabbi. My grandfather was a rabbi. Both great-grandfathers on my mother's side were rabbis, Reform and Hasidic. And on my Hasidic side, our rabbinic lineage goes back at least 11 generations. So rabbinics is in the blood, in the DNA, and it's very hard to not be affected by that. And my mother was the first woman to be ordained as a rabbi in Israel. We don't share last names, so that we get an extra 5 minutes of people not realizing that we're the same family. So I kind of grew up in a family where rabbinics was the norm, Jewish education was the norm, because my father is not a rabbi, but he's a Jewish educator. And it was everywhere. It was in our house, in the community I grew up in Kol HaNeshama in Jerusalem, in the school, the Reform school my parents founded for me when I was in the first grade. And in the youth movement, being a Reformed Jew was everything I did pretty much 24/7. And I always did rabbinic things. Even when I was 14, I was already a bar and bat mitzvah tutor. And I was leading tefillot at age 14 at Kol HaNeshama, and I was in the youth movement. So it was kind of something I always did, but at least in the beginning, I said, I'm not going to be a rabbi. I'll be an educator like my father. I'll be in informal education. I worked for many years with the Israeli Reform Youth Movement and with the pre-army gap year program, the Mechina. I was an education officer in the army. So for most of my 20s, I thought that would be my direction. But I always did rabbinic things on the side, kind of for fun. Like I still did bar mitzvah tutoring, and I led tefillot, and I taught. And at one point, after I was finishing my BA in Jewish history, the recruiter for UC, Rabbi Leora Ezrahi, called me, and she said, enough already. It's time. And I thought about it and decided that, yes, it is indeed time. I knew I wanted to have an MA. I wanted to be a parent already. So I had already done all of that. And
You already had the MA.
a BA. Well, I was actually finishing my MA already at the time. Yeah.
In what field?
Jewish history, specifically history of the Reform movement in the Eastern Europe. I wrote my thesis about a sort of reform community in Odessa in the 19th century.
That's interesting.
The untold story of Reform Judaism of Eastern Europe. There is an untold story. Yeah, so actually I flirted with academia for a while, but then realized that I was much more of a kind of in the field type of person. And I started rabbinical school at age 30. I was, I think, like the youngest student at the time. Most Israeli students are older. The next year, someone younger than me showed up.
So I want to pause because that's very different.
Yes.
That phenomenon is very different than my experience, which was when I started in 78. Maybe there was one second career person, maybe two, but otherwise all 60 of us were not far away from university. So why is that? And it
will almost always be older because you have to come after your BA. Israelis start their BAs later because we have our military service. So most of us will only start university at age 22, 23, 24, and 3 years of university. So you're not going to be getting people before age 27, 28. By that time, a lot of Israelis are married already, so they have to work. Married even with children. I was certainly already married with children by that time. So we've already been working in the field for years, and we just on average, that's how most of us come. And even 30 is young. Most people come late 40s.
Well, that's really what I'm asking. I understand about the army before university, but
because it's not as likely a life choice, I think. I mean, for me, it was. And the ones who are younger tend to have been the ones who grew up in the Reform movement. For a lot of people who didn't grow up Reform or don't grow up with an idea of a rabbi, then it's very foreign. It takes a lot of time to warm up to the idea and understand what it means.
Okay. All right. And if you would, a word or two, I'm not sure people who watch or listen to this are interested, but I am, in the curriculum, the HUC Jerusalem curriculum.
But when I was there was a lot of emphasis on Talmud and biblical scholar. It was very academic, which I actually liked because I come from a very academic background. But there was also a lot of things that had to do with spiritual caregiving. We learned Christianity from a priest, which was great and perfect for what I do now. We had a lot of field work. You had to do a lot of kind of an internship, things like that. A lot of group orientation and things that you do together as a group and discussing a lot of discussions on what is your rabbinic identity and what does it mean to be a rabbi, Israeli culture, Israeli history, Israeli poetry, music. Because I also did kind of a more musical track, we also learned a lot of prayer traditions from, North Africa, Iraq and Iran, Persia, things like that. So I spent a lot of time also learning liturgical music from lots of different traditions, which was really great.
Yeah, which especially this last part makes your education have some significant differences. In particular, I don't know much about other musical traditions than sort of the basic North American Ashkenazi, but I know they're out there. And so you come to your Jewishness your rabbinate with significantly different and I think advantageous backgrounds. Plus, you guys, of course, don't have to worry about the language.
Exactly. That, once you don't have to kind of spend time, I don't want to say waste time because it's not a waste of time, obviously, but if you don't have to spend time on learning a language, it frees up time to go into really deep places. And for me, it was excellent because it really set me up for one of the projects I'm doing now, which is being the editor of the emerging Israeli Machzor.
Yeah, we'll get back to that later. I'm very interested in that. So that was 8 years ago. So what have you been doing these last 8 years?
So after I was ordained, I was offered a wonderful position in the Jezreel Valley, which is a little northeast to Haifa, to serve an unaffiliated, kind of more rural community called Nigun Alev, Melody of the Heart, which was founded kind of alongside the traditions of the pioneers of the Jezreel Valley, the first kibbutzim and the first moshavim. And a lot of the founders are third and fourth generation to those families, people who came to the land of Israel to work the soil and recreate Jewish culture, but wanted actually to have a bit of a synagogue or at least a space to pray. So I served there for 7 years in a very, very secular community. It's changed a lot of how I view Judaism and liberal Judaism in general.
Wow. So a couple points about that. How did it change your view of liberal Judaism?
First of all, I became even more democratic about what is prayer. Like for me, prayer doesn't have to be, you have to do 1, 2, 3. I really believe that, there's no real difference between the Psalms and Leah Goldberg, to put it that way. I mean, there's historical differences and textual difference, but in the essence, I don't find a difference, and I don't mind swapping out anything.
All right, so that's an idea that I think will find resonance with a lot of people. But who's Leah Goldberg?
Leah Goldberg is just one of the most wonderful Israeli poets who wrote, the most beautiful, transcendent, liturgical poetry, modern Hebrew. But she's just an example. It could be anybody else.
I know, for our audience.
For your audience, yeah, just the idea that Jewish, Israeli, Hebrew culture is alive and contemporary and relevant. And I have to find the language that speaks to the people I work with, who many of them maybe have zero knowledge of prayer, but know everything about Israeli culture and society. I grew up in Kol Neshama, which is like on the more traditional side of Reform prayer. And even though I know pretty much all traditional prayer, I rarely use it because most of the families I work with, if I do a bar mitzvah, they're not going to sit through a whole prayer service. We'll create a prayer service that's a mix of some of the siddur, some of things that they write, some things from, kind of classical Israeli music like Nomi Shemer, but contemporary things that the kids know. I try to find something for everything. Or some of them didn't grow up Ashkenazi, so I need to bring things from Sephardic traditions or Moroccan traditions or maybe Russian-speaking traditions. So it makes you a lot more eclectic. Also, I have people who are very, very much anti-God. So we have to rewrite a blessing with no God in it, which I find also that sometimes separates me very much from my Reform colleagues in the United States. Like I find no problem taking God out of liturgy, even though I'm a very God-believing person myself.
So why don't you have a problem doing that?
Because I can 100% understand why people don't believe in God. And I mean, believing or not believing in God makes equal sense to me. And just because somebody doesn't believe in God doesn't mean they can't have a spiritual language that's rooted in Hebrew language.
Okay, so I'm going to press this a little bit because that issue, of course, is not foreign to America. I know when I stand up in front of a congregation and say a prayer or talk about theology or root whatever I'm talking about in Jewish sources, I know that if I interviewed every one of those people in the congregation, maybe as many as half would express some degree of skepticism. So there's nothing new to the American scene. But how do you call? I'm just going to press this a little bit. How do you call a prayer without God in it a spiritual experience? In other words, what do you mean by spiritual experience?
For me, prayer it's very internal. It doesn't matter who's on the other end. What matters is the movement of your soul in that moment. And if the movement of the soul of a person is to express their feelings, their fears, their worries, their exaltation, their awe, in a way that's beyond their own self, That's prayer for me. It doesn't, like, if you say God's name, fine. If you don't, also fine. It's more about the internal movement of the person. And I think that prayer is a safe space for people to express themselves. We don't have a lot of safe spaces to really express everything you're feeling. And prayer is one of them.
Okay, I like that. I like that answer. So you spent 7 years. Remind me, I'm sorry, Nigun Halev.
Nigun Halev, and then about a year and a half ago, I finished my work at the community, and I'm now the director of an NGO called Spirit of the Galilee, which is a nonprofit dedicated to bringing together faith leaders of all faiths in the Galilee. We have 6. We have Jews, Christians, Muslims, Druze, Buddhists, and Baha'i. And even, and even within each religion, we have, different kinds of Jews, different kinds of Christians, different kinds of Muslims. So we're very, very diverse. And we bring together the leaders to be, first of all, for them to get to know each other, for them to be less suspicious, and for them to promote peacemaking within their communities and bringing our communities together. So we do leadership training for religious leaders and shared society activities for the public at large.
So give us an example of one of your programs.
So our flagship program is the leadership program. We're about 35 religious leaders from 6 different religions who meet once a month to study together, to learn about our different communities. Often it's around the holidays. Like right now, our Iftar, our Ramadan feast is coming up that we'll be doing together. But we did Christmas, Hanukkah, the Druze religions, so on. We also have a 2-day retreat. We give micro grants to participants of the program and want to bring their communities together. We do a lot of work with music and culture because we believe that music can cut through hours of dialogue and bring people together a lot faster. About 7 meetings a month that are centered around music with Jewish and Arab musicians, just really creating spaces for people to have positive cultural experiences together. And we model every time we meet religious leaders and we are out and about together in our communities, just modeling to the world what our friendship could look like and what partnership can look like. We also pray a lot together. That's one thing.
And how does that work?
Religions.
How does that work?
Well, oftentimes we'll ask people to bring their own prayers, and, we learn to sit next to each other, even if somebody else's prayer isn't exactly my prayer. But we usually tend, to bring the more kind of universalist side of each of our prayer traditions. And a lot of times we write prayers together, original prayers.
Really?
You can find them on our website or on our Facebook page.
I'll definitely check it out. Well, how long was Spirit of the Galilee? Was it Ruach HaGalil?
Lilit.
Ruach Lilit. How long have you been around?
So it was an NGO that was founded over 30 years ago, but did different things. And in this kind of constellation, it's been around for about 5 years. It started during COVID. We would meet on Zoom. And I was just a participant in the Interfaith group. And it's just grown dramatically in the past year and a half, especially. Yeah.
And why is that?
I think it has to do with, being able to raise funds and doing really great activities and finding the right leaders who are really invested and who really feel that this is something that they want to do, and finding right partners and also people, once they get over the initial fear, they want to be in peace-building situations. It reminds them that maybe we won't have to be at war at any time. It is possible for us to live together and do things together.
So you got Baha'is and you got the normal, you got the religions that you expect, Baha'is and Buddhists.
Yes.
So that means there
a lot of Baha'i and Buddhists. We have a few Buddhists who are Jewish and Buddhist, but one of them is a monk. And the Baha'i, we often do things with the Baha'i Center in Akko and Haifa. They're more international, but they're interesting.
Besides the leadership thing, so I have a question about sort of tachlit. Like as the director now, where do you plan? Where would you like to take this organization in terms of sort of bigger picture of its mission?
I think we can be a model for the whole Middle East for how we can create friendships and relationships built on trust, built on equality, built on mutual respect. We really believe that we need to hold and create this language of peace and empathy and respect for each other, even when everyone else is fighting all around us. We're not political leaders in that sense that we're going to, change the policy directly, but we have influence. We have influence on communities. We have influence on individuals. We have influence on soldiers or politicians. And it's our job to bring a prophetic voice to the world, that it doesn't have to be war and suffering all the time. We can do better. So we call it the Order of the Spirit of the Galilee, that we want people to join our order from around the world and really, show our messages to the entire world. First of all, we want our own people in the Galilee to believe in a better life for all of us, that we all deserve a better life. That's like our first tachlit, to make sure that our people in the Galilee are doing everything they can to commit to living together peacefully and with respect and inequality. After that, we want to spread the message around. And it's not easy. A lot of Israelis, Jews especially, are fearful, they're suspicious, they're in Arab-hating phase, Muslim-hating phase. So to speak towards why we need to respect each other, why we need to speak in Hebrew and Arabic, why we need to treat our Arab neighbors like they're our brothers and our equal citizens it's not muvan me'elav, as we say. It's not the obvious. We have to say that. Unfortunately, I wish it was the obvious.
It gives you lots of work to do. Are you communicating this organization international?
Yeah, we just got back from a tour in the United States. Wait, I'm just going to open the door for my dog. Here, you can go outside. Achutza. We just got back. My partner, Father Saba Chaj, he's a Greek Orthodox priest from the town of Idlin. And we just got back from a tour in the U.S. We were in New York, Boston, Brookline, and Rochester, New York. And it was an amazing tour. We met, rabbis and communities and churches and mosques. We met interfaith forums. We met priests, imams. It was really special. And we'll do another tour soon at some time. Not sure when, but...
Only because I have a vested interest in one of your places. Where were you in Brookline?
We're at St. Paul's Episcopal Church.
In St. Paul's. I was a member of a Chavurah in Brookline that met in St. Paul's bi-weekly, so I know that church.
Really? Oh, they're so nice. They were so nice to us. We did all Sunday service with them, and they were great. And it was in partnership with TBZ, with Rabbi Claudia Kreiman.
Temple Beth Zion. That's great. Okay, so I may want to come back to that a little bit, but your obvious interest in tefillah has led you to be. Are you like a co-chair or?
She's Rabbi Professor Adalia Marks is the academic and editor at large, and I'm the executive editor.
So why do you need a Machzor? Of course, is the special prayer book for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. First of all, I've got a question for you. This is not about your work in particular. What does the word Machzor mean? Don't tell me. I know it's a prayer book for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Yeah, no, it means Machzor is like a cycle.
Yeah, so I understand that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to like the cycle of prayer. Machzor hayam, the cycle of the days and the prayers. I think that's where it comes from. And I think they probably just wanted to differentiate it from the Siddur. Siddur also plays with Seder, Seder Avodah, Bet Mikdash, la.
But there's a Seder also in the Machzor. I mean,
yeah.
I think I may ask ChatGPT if it can convert it because I've never been able to adequately explain how that word applies to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Why do you need? I don't know. Actually, is this within if you're working with Dalia Marks, it's within the Reform movement, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So is there an existing Machzor at the moment?
The previous Machzor came out in the early 80s. So first of all, it's already 40 years old. It's as old as I am. And not only are they falling apart, we can't reprint them because nobody knows where the original is. They're also very much a product of the 1980s. And 5 years ago or 4 years ago, the wonderful prayer book Tfilat Adam came out, and it was revolutionary.
Why? Why is it revolutionary?
It's very different from the original Tfilat Avodah Shebalev, the first Israeli Reform Siddur, was very much a Reform Siddur in the sense that it was shorter. It took out everything that had to do with like the Korbanot, the Bet Mikdash, all those things. And in some places it was even egalitarian. Like it had the Imahot and the Avot. And it also had 2 pages in the back with 3 Israeli songs. And that's not already revolutionary. And it was groundbreaking a few years ago and was accepted with so much love and excitement. So due to two things. One, most of our communities need a new Machzor anyway. Everyone is,
and that's a pragmatic reason.
and also everyone's praying with a Machzor and a booklet of Israeli poems that goes with it. So they're already using all these additions, and we need, it's time to have a companion to Tfilat Adam that goes in this. So the new Machzor will be very much in the vein of Tfilat Adam. It will be a continuation of that.
So a lot of original work, poetry, complete. Yeah. At this point, I think everybody in Reform takes egalitarianism for granted. So if the
but if you look in the old Machzor, Kavanat Alev from 40 years ago, you won't find the Imahot half the times.
Yeah, I mean, from the American context, I know that in the 80s, there was still a transitional moment.
Right, in Israel too. So even though everyone adds it, Baal Peh, it needs to be in the book.
So what do you, besides this sort of collecting and editing, and beyond the egalitarianism, what are some of the different elements that are going to be incorporated into the?
We actually brought back a lot of the more traditional prayers that were taken out by the original editors. We combine lots of different nusachim, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, Italian, Hebrew, different.
What's a nusach?
A nusach is like the type of prayer. So nusach Ashkenaz is also in music, but it's also in words. There are differences between the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic. They write it a little differently. Untaneh Tokef, I think, doesn't even exist in the Sephardic version at all. Isn't part of the Sephardic Siddur at all.
Really?
In general, the way that Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews treat Yom Kippur is different. Different vibes.
Yeah.
It's very heavy, very sad. Sephardic is almost happy. Like, wow, we get another year. Of course, it's very affected by October 7th. We have texts that are post-October 7th that are part of the emerging Machzor. It's like you can feel it. It's in there. And in general, Israelis have been praying nonstop since October 7th. It's just not your classical Siddur prayer. You can feel October 7th in this Machzor. Not necessarily overtly. Sometimes it's very subtle. But I can tell it's there. And a lot of creating this kind of new spiritual language. And also, there's a lot of revenge in the original Machzor. We took that out. We took a lot of that out and changed it. Every time it's nekama, we changed it to nechama.
Translate, please.
It works well in Hebrew, but from vengeance to solace or comfort. It's changing one letter.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's nice. And your daughter's back. And where are you in the project? How soon will it be published?
The plan is for it to be published for the high holidays of 2027. Mm-hmm. We felt we needed another year of workshop. So we're going to workshop it again this year. Mm-hmm. Here, you can see it. This is our like drafts.
Your beta version.
So this is Ne'ilah, this is the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Shacharit and Musaf.
You have Musaf?
Oh, yeah.
That's
a serious Musaf.
That's a dramatic, you understand that's a dramatic change in Reform to feel up.
Yes, but there was one also in the Israeli Machzor, the previous one. Right. But that was different from Mishkan HaNefesh.
But I want to push this a little bit because as I understand it, the rejection of Musaf, early Reform Sidurim and Machzorim was a statement, was an important philosophical, theological statement. So reinstating it must mean something.
Yeah, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur Musaf is different. They have different purposes. But like, for instance, Seder Avodah, the whole work of the Kohen, we felt that one, from an educational standpoint, you can't take it out. It's part of our story. And second, it's this kind of theater, but theater can be important. Theater can be used to work through different ideas. And in this case, the idea is that we face our own mortality and we survive for one more year. That's kind of the idea of the Kohen. It was a symbol for that.
Okay. Tell me what you mean by the Kohen and the Kodesh Kodashim?
Yeah, he basically, he dies. He fake dies, and he comes back to life. And that's what we all do on Yom Kippur. We confront our mortality and live another day.
And that vibe is there ordinarily, but I guess you're suggesting that post October 7th, that vibe has a much larger.
I think so. I mean, it was already in the previous Machzor, but it was very powerful. When we asked, people were like, you cannot take it out. You have to leave it. But again, inflected with our Reform values. It's not about worshiping the Kohen. It's about having some sort of experience together.
Yeah. There's this Machzor privilege, the Kohanim and the Kehillah.
No.
Because
No. We all do everything together.
No duchaning.
No.
Well, that's very interesting.
We're all the Kohanim. All of us are the Kohanim.
So it's a symbolic use of the, because as a Kohen myself, every now and then, like about every 3 or 4 years, I enjoy the privilege of being a Kohen when I go into an Orthodox synagogue and they give me the Kohen Aliyah or whatever.
Yeah, so no, none of that. Another change we did, we brought back the traditional Torah readings. Not only them, we brought them in addition. Especially we thought in Mincha for Yom Kippur, it's very important to read what we call Parashat HaArayot, Vayikra Yudchet, the 18th chapter, which is very, very hard for us as Reform Jews to read because it's all about sexual boundaries. And we felt that, unfortunately, we still live in a world where sexual boundaries is something we need to discuss.
Take a moment and describe that Torah portion, because I'm sure a lot of my listeners don't.
Yeah, so it's a Torah portion that tries to regulate who you are allowed to be in a relationship with, and mostly who you are not allowed to be. And it's mostly about different family ties that you are not allowed to be in a sexual relationship with. There is also the incredibly problematic verse of the prohibition of male sexual relations, which we decided to put in a different color font and to write a little asterisk where we say that we recommend the communities do not read this verse. But to say, there's a reason why we read this Torah reading, even though it doesn't sound great to our ears, especially for Israeli modern Hebrew speakers, it's very hard to hear. But we feel that, our communities are not free from this. We have, unfortunately, sexual exploitation and sexual violence is so prevalent. We can't be too holy and read, the next chapter, which is what you usually read, but which is, all the beautiful, love your neighbor as yourself and so on, that they're all beautiful verses.
Right.
But we thought, we solved this, but no, we haven't.
So that's an interesting decision. There's sort of been 4 elements of this conversation so far. Your background, your education, that's 1. Your first position, that's 2. Ruach Belimit, did I say it right? And now this Machzor. And this all fits together in terms of what I want this podcast to be, which is an exploration of Jewish religious life in Israel. So now I'm like, maybe we can write this all a little bit larger. You're writing this for a community. You're not writing it in the abstract. So tell me about your perception of the liberal or Reformed Jewish community in Israel. So you got a community, and how do you see this community? How do you see it as it is, how it's growing, how this Machzor is helping?
Yeah, I think the values of liberal Judaism are very much in Israel, even if people aren't part of the community or Reform community.
At this point in the conversation, you have to know I'm going to ask you what those values are.
Yeah. So the values of equality, egalitarianism, informed choice, people having their own ability to make their own religious choices for themselves, this kind of mix of traditional and contemporary, the push for a more democratic Jewish Israeli society, fighting against racism and homophobia and all that stuff. Those values are very much part of some of Israeli society. Like, for instance, our rabbis were incredibly active in the protest movement and still are.
So we're just picking up from our conversation of a few weeks ago. So first of all, again, it's really nice to see you. When we spoke last time, this thing hadn't begun, this war. And I hope you and your family are doing well in your community. You say you live in a pocket that's not getting as much action as other places.
Yeah, we live also very closely to an Air Force base. So you might hear fighter planes taking off or landing as we speak. But because of our proximity to that base, we have even better aerial defense than most.
Okay. All right. So, what impressed me about our conversation, what we talked a great deal about, is your work as the what's the title? Co-director, co-chair?
A director of Spirit of the Galilee.
Uh-huh.
I'm the editor of the emerging Israeli Machzor.
Right. And let's talk about the Machzor, for example, for the moment. How far along is the project?
Well, we were actually supposed to put it out for the holiday season of 2026. But the communities and the committee begged for another year to do another year of, working with with drafts and networking, because when they worked on Tfilat Adam, I wasn't involved there, but they workshopped it almost every Shabbat at a different community for 2 years. And here we only have, like one shot a year. So people don't have the chance to kind of workshop it and get used to it, even though we've done, like praying Yom Kippur 2 months ahead. and we've done like artificial workshops, but it's not the same as using it at real time.
So are you going to do that this year?
So we're doing another year of using it as drafts, and it'll be printed in shops and used in 2027, August, September.
Remind me some of the interesting focuses or changes you've made in the liturgy and how it's Israel specific.
Well, it's also continuation of Tfilat Adam, which a lot of the same ideas kind of were started there, was really bringing in, different prayer traditions, not only Ashkenazi prayer traditions, working on the gender language, bringing in, classical kind of Israeli writing and poems and Israeli songs and music, but also contemporary prayers written by Israeli Reform rabbis, working on some of the liturgy that, is actually bringing back some of the things that were taken out in the previous Machzor while bringing in other things. So really trying to kind of hone in on the Reform movement's ideology and how it comes to term through prayer, which I think the Reform movement has always done. It's always been a huge part of how Reform Jews pray, is you see what they believe in through their prayers.
So, for example, if you would share some elements of Reform ideology, as you put it, as you see it.
It could be anything from making prayer very personal and kind of speaking in the first person, and not only in the kind of the royal we, as prayer often does, bringing in messages of peace and tolerance, gender equality, also talking to God in the feminine form. In English, it doesn't matter as much, but in Hebrew, it really does.
Right.
Also, another example is the traditional Torah service for Mincha of Yom Kippur is Vaikra 18, what we call Parashat Arayot. I don't know what it's called in English, but very challenging.
The sort of sexual...
Yeah, like laws, who you're allowed to have sexual relationships and so on. And, the Reform movement, I think not only in Israel, but in other places as well, swapped it out. Leviticus 19. And we actually brought it back. So now you can have both options, because we felt that, sexual harm has not been eradicated from this world, and we have to.
Right.
So that we took a very long time discussing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting point. I mean, Leviticus 19 is the holiness code, Kadoshim Tihiyu. That's a lot easier to wrap your mind around, but
yeah, and I think a lot of us are like, oh, this doesn't happen in our community, but it does happen in our communities.
Yeah,
it can happen anywhere. So we can't give this very nice kind of clean, we're so holy, and just kind of ignore that there might be sexual harm in our communities. So that was like a very long discussion. Then we added a special al-chetz for sexual crimes, I guess, sexual sins, that was written by an Israeli Reform rabbi under the Forum of the Daughters of Dinah, which is a forum of Israeli rabbis who work in the field of sexual...
What's the name of the organization?
The Daughters of Dinah.
So, Benot
Dinah.
Uh-huh.
It started by Israeli Reform female rabbis, and now there are also men in it. So I think they.
And for the sake of the audience, why Dinah?
Dinah is the daughter of Jacob and Leah, who was sexually assaulted in the book of Genesis, and her story was silenced, and we never hear from her again after.
Okay, well that's interesting in itself. So maybe in a broad way, just focus on how you see non-Orthodox Judaism, and mainly Reform, but you can take in the Machzor movement also. How would you see it evolving over the next decade?
It's hard to say, mostly because I can't think what's going to happen in the next 2 days. I'll put it this way. I think that Reform Judaism or liberal Judaism an incredibly important role in the next 10 years of Israel, in the sense that has to join hand in hand with secular Judaism and with the Israeli Arabs, the non-Jewish citizens of Israel, because we are the ones who can really save a Jewish and democratic Israel. If we want to have a democratic and Jewish Israel, then the liberal movements, together with traditional, secular, and non-Jewish forces, have to be leading. And I think it's not, as we say, lo bichdi. It's not by accident that Rabbi Gilad Kariv, the member of Knesset, is one of the leading voices in Israeli society today, exactly for that. And that the Israeli Reform movement had made a very obvious choice where she stands on a lot of political issues. It's different, again, from how Reform movement in the United States speaks and so on, because we have our own way of doing things. But the fact that the Reform movement has been part of the protest movement from the beginning, officially, not just individuals who went. The fact that we have been leading the protest movement in so many places, that our Judaism is the one that was pushing for a hostage agreement, that we're the ones who are speaking out now about Jewish terrorism in the West Bank, that we're the ones who are trying to lead connections between Jews and non-Jews in Israel. I think that if there will be an Israel in the next 10 years and it will be somewhat normal, then it's because the Reform movement stood up and fought with everything they have. So what can be, I have no idea.
Okay. All right. We're active in Maram, the Reform Rabbis movement. So how, I realize I don't have a clear picture of how it functions in that way, how it functions as a group and politically. Does it meet regularly?
Yeah, of course, once a month there's a Maram forum. We're led by wonderful Rabbi Efrat Rotem. She's the professional, and the chair and the lay leader is Rabbi Benny Minich. And first of all, they're both wonderful, and they're both kind of like they're like my generation. So people who are like in their late 30s, early 40s, kind of the new leading generation of the Reform movement in Israel. And they both have very interesting stories. Like Efrat is a very kind of out and proud lesbian rabbi, founded Choshen, which was a very groundbreaking LGBTQ organization in Israel. Amazing person. And Benny is an immigrant from Ukraine, from former Soviet Union. I think even though he has a Jewish father, he underwent conversion, and he speaks English, Russian, Ukrainian, Hebrew. He was in the army, and has a very interesting story of basically he made Aliyah alone at age 14, I think, to Israel, and came from very humble background and grew up some of his life in the Soviet Union. So I think really interesting leadership of Maram, diverse, interesting. And we meet once a month, and we have different forums. We have forums that write about, what we feel is right to write about politically, and different projects. And they do a lot of work of just working with rabbis in the field, helping them, giving them guidance, even they have psychologists when we need, things like that. They do good work.
Yeah, I hope.
I was on the board, so I'm not objective.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Do you have a specific position or just a general board?
No, I had to leave the board because I'm fundraising for the Machzor, and they can't.
You're fundraising for the what?
For the Machzor. I'm also the fundraising coordinator, so I can't be on the board then. Those are the rules.
So one more word about the group that you're running. Remind me, I forgot how to say it in Hebrew because I got it wrong last time.
Lili.
I said Ruach HaGalil, Ruach Galilit. So We spoke about this last time, but maybe just a little bit more. Your work and what if anything you guys are working on now. How and if you're responding in any way to the current war with Iran in its 19th day.
Yeah, I can't say we're responding it's not like we're sitting and holding signs saying stop the war. We're mostly kind of trying to survive. That's first. We've met a few times on Zoom. We did an international prayer to stop the war, an international interfaith prayer service to stop the war with religious leaders from all over Israel, and including two Iranian refugees who live in Israel. And that was very beautiful. And, a lot of our programming, we moved to Zoom. We also went together to the town of Zarzir. It's a Bedouin town that was hit by a missile a few days ago. We went to visit them and we brought them donations and equipment and things that they needed. And we try to do every few days a Zoom to kind of just keep our spirits up and help each other. And mostly kind of planning for the day after. So I can't say we're really I honestly, I don't even know what to do. It's not like we're just trying to, support each other and be there for each other and remind each other that we will meet soon. Like next week, we're supposed to have our monthly meeting. We'll see what we do. And a lot of us are supporting other communities. So we're trying to support the communities.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. And there's I think, last time we had more energy and we were also more, it was more acute. We were still trying to get the hostages back. And now I think everyone's just very, very down, very depressed. Nobody knows how long this is going to take. Nobody knows what our lives are going to look like. And it's very hard to mobilize and know what to do. So right now, some of us are not sleeping at all. Our area is a little bit better, but some people are chronically being woken up in the middle of the night. You know this from your daughter, of course.
My daughter in Tel Aviv, who on Saturday or Sunday had to go 7 times, I think, to the shelter.
Yeah, it's insane. Nobody can live like that for long.
Yeah.
And when you live like that, it's very, very hard to function. Some of us have children who are at home all day. My kids are home all day, sitting on my head. As we say, that's how you say it in here. They're driving me nuts. And it's very hard to function. And so our response mostly is just to support each other, make sure that everybody's okay, calling each other, supporting if somebody gets, like one of our members, her windows were broken. So I went over there with a cake. What do you do?
You go over with a cake is what you do.
When we went to Zarzir, we brought them some great stuff. The kids were very happy.
Okay. All right.
That's all we can do. I wish I could be more like, this is what we're going to do, but
no, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Here in July, I'll tell you one thing we're working on because we're trying to plan ahead. We want to, in July, do a 3-day interfaith conference in the Galilee, which here now there's a fighter jet going over my head. I don't know if you can hear it.
I can. Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah, that's actually pretty quiet.
And by the way, it is my intention to be in Israel July and August.
Here in July, 8th, 9th of July, we're planning a big interfaith conference for about 60, 70 people in Nesamim, which is a Christian kibbutz, not far from Akko. And that's a big thing we're working on now. The first day will be for the Spirit of the Galilee, and then the next day we'll open it up to...
Wonderful. It's just so interesting to find out about the kinds of things that you're doing. That's the point of this podcast, to an audience that doesn't know about what's going on in Israel in this kind of micro level. So thank you very much. Again, I wish you and your family well, and
you too, and your daughter too. I hope she sleeps.
Probably not as much as you, but like I said when we were speaking before we started recording, I've lived a lot of my life through Israel's wars, and I hope this one is over, and I hope the results will keep Israel safe for a long time to come. But that remains to be seen. So, Leora, thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I invite you to stay tuned for future episodes, as with the help of my guests, I continue to unpack the diverse lives that rabbis lead. Special thanks to Steve Lubetkin of Lubetkin Communications for engineering this episode. You can reach me, Rabbi Phil Cohen, at rabbipodcast@gmail.com. Easy enough to remember. rabbipodcast, one word, @gmail.com. See you next time, and thanks a lot.